All right, it's time for another update and forecast on the Gifford fire. We did have some growth yesterday, and then it does look like it's fairly active right now. So what we're going to do throughout the course of this video is kind of go past, present, and future. We're going to see where some of that growth was yesterday. We're going to see where the fire looks to be active right now. And then looking at the weather forecast and some of the topography, we'll try to identify where this fire might grow in the future. So the first thing we always do is figure out where this fire is. You got the Bay Area up here, Los Angeles down here. Then if we zoom into the Central Coast, the Gifford fire is about maybe 15 miles northeast of Santa Maria. And then just looking at some of the past part of this fire, acreage is now up to 105,000 acres, so largest wildfire that California has seen this year. And if we want to see where that growth was yesterday, it's where you see that bright red color. So it started where you have that purple, and then it expanded to the blue on August 2nd. And then August 5th is going to be that orange color, and then that red is where we had the most recent growth yesterday. And that northwestern side of the fire was quite active with the very hot, dry conditions that we had yesterday afternoon. While I'm thinking about it, I should also point out there's still some evacuation orders and warnings in place. Always good to stay updated with local resources when it comes to that kind of information. And then containment, around 15%, if we want to see where that containment is. This shows the fire perimeter in red, and then anywhere where you see black is where the fire is contained. So we do have some on this western side, and then not a big surprise, but we have some containment on the eastern side as well. That's the side of the fire that bumps into the Madre fire that we had earlier this year. So the Madre fire would have cleared out some fuels, so it's easier for the fire to stop there, just because there's not much fuel to keep that fire going. I do notice a little black showing up on this very southern side of the fire, and that's one spot on the fire where I'm actually feeling fairly confident right now, even though we do still have parts of that perimeter that are technically in the red. So 105,000 acres, 15% containment, kind of sums up the past. Although, just taking one more look at this, it does look like most of the recent heat was from the north and the south, where you see more of that reddish color. The reason I wanted to point that out is that's actually what we see on the satellite imagery as well. Clearly, largest amount of smoke coming up on the northern side of this fire, but then you'll see a couple little puffs on the south right there. And that'll be a little bit easier to see if we look at the natural color fire. So where you see that bright orange, see that little flash down there on the south. And then I'd imagine that's pretty small on your screen. So we'll check out this map instead. So this shows the fire perimeter. First thing we can do is look at structures in the area. This is part of the reason it's such good news that they do have some black on that southwestern side of the fire. See right there, tied into 166 and then going down to Buckhorn Ridge. That is where the fire is closest to the largest amount of structures. So it's great to see that that's now in the black. Same with that southern finger as well. You see how close that is to some of those orange dots that represent structures. So that's a part of the fire that's looking decent as well. And then where we have the largest amount of activity on the north, you're not seeing as many of those orange structures. So, I mean, if you had to have this fire burning anywhere, you probably would pick the northern side and the southern part that's in the wilderness. And that actually is where the fire is the most active. So to figure out where it's been the most active recently, we can look at the MODIS and VIIRS satellites. Anything that has the yellow or orange stars, that's going to be where the fire was active more than 24 hours ago. Red stars is going to be within the last 24 hours, at least as of when the satellite information was collected. So clearly, largest amount was on the north here. Still a little bit of heat showing up on the southern edge. Wouldn't say that if you don't see any stars, that means the fire's out. It most likely means it's just smoldering in that area. And then this is an interesting feature right here. See those red stars? I was listening to the operational update, and they said they did have a little slop over where the fire was able to go outside of where the previous fire perimeter was. But it sounds like they are trying their best to attack that right now. Although, based on the satellite imagery, it does look like we have that orange glow on the northeastern side of the fire. So largest amount northwest. That's where we saw it yesterday. What else we could do is look at the most recent heat detections. So this is going to overestimate the fire, but it is also the most recent information we have. So it's usually helpful to look at. And it even is showing a little on the south here, although I will say that's in the yellow and orange. And that's most likely those little puffs of smoke that we saw earlier in the day, but it actually looks like they've maybe blasted that with some retardant, maybe got some crews in there, and that seems to be diminishing right now, whereas the northern or the northwest and the northeast on this fire seem to be still extremely active. That's where we have the red showing up right now, and it'd be interesting just to go back to modus and veers, turn on structures, and just see how close this is to this cluster of structures there. So right there to, let's just estimate the fire's moved that far. It's about 4 miles away. So that's decently close, but we haven't been seeing it move that fast recently. I wish we had the ruler tool on this one as well. I would say that's my main concern on this fire is this northwestern side, and listening to the operational update, that seems to be their main concern right now as well. And then when it comes to that slop over, you can actually see it a little bit better on our 3D incident map. And it looks like they actually just updated the fire perimeter to include that slop over on the northeast. Although, as I speak, we have some helicopters flying over it right now. Looks like there's a plane flying over it as well. So they're certainly attacking that part of the fire. And then I want to check out the north because that's where we had the largest amount of growth recently, just so you can see some of the topography that they're dealing with in this area. It's steep, rugged terrain. What can happen here? We'll just zoom in. Right here is maybe have a burning ember get picked up from the major blaze, and then it gets dropped down here, and then the fuels are extremely dry right now. Yesterday they were saying if you threw 100 cigarettes, the fuels are so dry that it would start 100 fires. So same goes for burning embers. That's going to drop down, goes down here, and then it's able to burn up this hill. This is most likely the area that's going to be filled in with fire the next time we look at the fire perimeter map. So that's the northwestern side, gives you an idea just of some of the crazy topography that we do have in this area, which makes sense why they're using so much aircraft on this. The other thing I'll say is we did have a large amount of growth the other night in this area. And somebody asked in the comments, they said, well, why did the fire grow so much to the west if the winds are blowing to the east? It seems like the fire would be moving against the winds. My first reaction was there hasn't really been a huge wind event on this fire up until 2 nights ago, I believe. So this fire has been predominantly driven by dry fuels and the steep, rugged topography. So the fire likes to go uphill. But then I mentioned 2 nights ago, we actually did have some pretty strong winds right around midnight that were able to lead to a lot of that growth that we saw going towards the west. So that's maybe leads into more technical details than we need to get into throughout the course of this video, but just thought that was a great question, so thought I'd try to answer it. Another way to see some of the steep topography is actually just looking at it in real life. This is the last 2 hours on the Gifford fire, and I just wanted to show you this so you could see what kind of terrain the crews are working on in this area, and why you can imagine this would be pretty hard just to stop. So topography, dry fuels, last little bit when it comes to things that lead to fire danger that we're going to look at will be the weather forecast. So we're just going to take the exact latitude and longitude from the fire, and we're going to get our forecast from that. So today, looks like we still have some 90s out there. They're expecting those afternoon winds, or we're in the afternoon winds right now, and that's why the fire is as active as it is. It's the hottest, driest part of the day, but then it's also where we get those afternoon winds, mostly pushing upslope around 20 to 25 miles per hour. The forecast tomorrow looks very similar. Looks like it's 90, same winds in the afternoon coming from the southwest, We know that that's the way the winds are coming from because the smoke is going up towards the northeast. And that tells us that the fire is most likely going to want to be moving up towards the northeast as well. So now we're getting into a little bit of future forecasting. It'll be interesting to see what they're able to do with that slop over right there, because based on the wind plot, that's going to be perfectly in alignment with the direction those winds are going. It's going to try to take that slop over and continue to push it to the northeast. Although I will say it's a pretty decent distance to where we have that slop over to where we have the largest amount of structures. It's about 7.3 miles right there. And then on this northern side, that's where the fire is going to try to push up in this area. Those southwesterly winds pushing the fire to the northeast. And one thing we could do is think about on this side, the fire is actually going to be kind of going downhill in that area, so it would be going slower. Where I'd expect maybe more of the growth is going to be right here, where if that's the fire front, the winds push it down into this canyon, and then it's able to rush up the other side of this slope right here. So basic principle is fire moves more slowly downhill than it does uphill. And then I will say Sunday and Monday and Tuesday looks like a pretty challenging forecast. Looks like we're actually going to start warming up again back into the mid 90s, which means some parts of the fire will be in the triple digits. That'll mean it's even drier out there. And the drier it is, the drier the fuels get. The drier the fuels get, the easier it is for those burning embers to start spot fires, and just the easier it is for the fire to spread in general, because it doesn't have to use as much of its energy to evaporate the moisture out of the fuels before they combust. If they're exceptionally dry, they're just ready to combust. So that's where temperature and humidity kind of come into play when it comes to how fast the fire is going to spread. So tomorrow, I'd be expecting similar conditions to what we have today, which is fairly active. And I mean, we're going to have to watch this closely, because looking at the weather forecast, it actually just looks like it's going to get more difficult as we get into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So just kind of summarizing, I think this is always a good way to check our work a little bit. Hot and dry conditions will persist across the incident today. That is what's happening right now. Afternoon temperatures into the 90s to around 100, while humidity drops into the teens and even locally into the single digits. Hard to believe it could be even drier as we get into the start of next week. And then southwesterly up canyon winds can be expected this afternoon with gusts around 20 miles per hour. So that'll try to push the fire up canyon towards the northeast. And then it says very warm and dry conditions will continue into the first half of next week. No significant wind events are expected. So glad that they like to end on a little bit of good news as well. No significant wind events expected. That would be the last thing that we'd need right now. The other piece of good news, total personnel on this fire is now up almost to 3,500. So they've got a lot of people working on this fire. If I zoom out right here one more time, you'll be able to see all the aircraft that they have on this fire as well. They're just all over the place, especially on that northeastern side right now, where they might still have a little visibility to try to handle this slop over. But I think that's just about enough details for today. I'll definitely be doing an update on this tomorrow. If you're local, as always, stay updated with all evacuation orders and warnings, as when conditions are this dry, things can change pretty quickly. So hopefully this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.